Hello, agentpreneurs, and welcome to episode 86 of the Daily List Report. I hope you're having a great week. I'm really excited for today's show. We've got Dr. Lee Davenport coming on. She was recognized by Inman as one of the top 25 real estate coaches in America. She's super delightful. You're going to absolutely love her. She's written some books. She's a top coach. We're going to talk today a little bit about her book, Profit with Your Personality. And I love this because I've been talking to you for months now that the best brand that you can build is a brand that is authentic to who you are. And now we're going to have a real expert confirm some of that thinking, but really go a lot deeper into that topic. I've got up on the screen here right now, Dr. Lee Davenport. I got Dr. Lee's YouTube page. We're going to post a link to this in the comments. Make sure you check it out. She's got a ton of really great videos here that you should be watching. Her website is also learnwithlee.realtor. We'll post a link to that as well. And you can get more information on her coaching, her books, so on and so forth. All of the great stuff is there. And of course, while you're here, I would appreciate if you would subscribe to our channel, click the little bell to be notified, and you won't miss any of our amazing guests. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Dr. Lee on the screen. Dr. Lee, say hello to the agentpreneurs of ListReports.
Hi guys, how are you? I hope you are faring wonderfully in this summer heat and all that's going on. Thanks for having me, Randy.
Oh, thank you so much for taking time to do this today. I'm really excited for this conversation. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. So thank you for doing this. Dr. Lee, why don't we start here, right? So I love it when our guests take a minute or two just to introduce themselves. I want our audience to get a chance to get to know a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you are and what you're passionate about. So if you could spend a couple minutes sharing that, that would be wonderful.
Of course. So I grew up, and I always say, unfortunately, in a real estate family. And for those that have children that help them in business, their children are probably saying the same thing. So my parents, I was free labor, and I really resented, although now I can appreciate it, but I resented then the fact that I just wanted to be a kid. I wanted to go outside, I wanted to play, but instead my dad, because they own different properties, if grass needed to be cut, I was on that crew.
Yeah.
If the tenant trashed the place, I was cleaning up soap scum from people I didn't know. So I feel like I got a little PTSD from it. Fast forward, I graduate from the University of Michigan. I get on I-75 like Michigan was on fire because I was done. So I get to Georgia. I'm working in an office based off of my degree in business, and I hated it. I was like, okay, I need to do something else. And all of my friends and family in Georgia were like, well, you know, real estate, you should be doing that. So things were going well. I jumped into real estate. I started buying properties like my parents were doing. But unfortunately, as we all know, the real estate recession came. So it's the end of 2007. My young and dumb stuff, and I'm talking about me and my 20s. I call my 20s my young and dumb years because I said, how bad can it get?
Yes.
Famous last words. I feel like I should have waved like a white flag. It was so bad, unfortunately, that many of my tenants, probably 95% of them, lost their jobs. So I'm upside down, didn't know what to do. And again, young and dumb me said, why don't I sell real estate? Yeah, okay. Yeah. So the whole market was crashing, but I am jumping in full force. And I remember at the time, my brokers were like, hey, you need to do door knocking, cold calling, and a lot of other cookie cutter things that were not working for me. So I got really frustrated, but I'm upside down, so I didn't have a choice. I had to make it work. And I decided at the time to get on something that was little and unknown. Now, again, this is into 2007, 2008, Facebook.
Yeah.
My brokers were like, what are you doing? That's for teenagers. It's not going anywhere. So as we know, it took off. Anyway, my business grew so much that my brokers then had me come in, do trainings. I started doing trainings at companies throughout the nation. Fast forward, I get my doctorate in all of these things because I noticed that I wasn't the only one that was told at the beginning of my sales career to do cookie cutter things that didn't work for me. So I said, okay, let's really study this because I'm not the only one. And every time I do a training, it resonates with people. They're like, wow, you're the person I've been looking for. So I got a chance to do my doctorate on sales and lead generation. And as a result, I got a chance to study top 1,000 agents in the nation. And from studying them, we were able to extract some principles that we really do feel um, cover the gamut of all of our different personality types. And we did the personality types based on this. So that was a little more than my story, but that's the
Yeah.
short, long version.
No, that's tremendous. I love that, right? I have a background in research, and so I have a deep appreciation for that. And I think what's going to really resonate with our audience who's listening is they've all heard, oh, go the cookie cutter stuff, right? They've all heard the make this many thises and knock on this many that's and all of that kind of stuff. And for a lot of people, it isn't who they are. It's just not part of their personality, so to speak. And I think that people end up feeling badly about themselves because they're like, those are the things that I'm told I'm supposed to do. Those are the things, that's the playbook, but that playbook isn't for me. So why don't let's kind of dive into this, right? So you wrote this book, Profit with Personality, and it's really, I think, based on this premise that you build your business with something that's consistent with who you are, right? So why don't you talk a little bit about some of the things that you learned as you did the research, as you wrote this book, and let's kind of get into the meat of it.
Absolutely. So I would say one of the first myths that I've come across is almost to your point, what you just said of how if I always call it Sally sells a lot. So Sally sells a lot, does X, Y, and Z, then that has to be the way to get this done. And again, if it doesn't work for you the exact same way, unfortunately, some of us, not all of us, but some of us take that internal and say, I must be broken. I must
Yes.
not be a good fit for this. There's something wrong with me. But there's a myth in that because what we've overlooked is not only her personality, but maybe even her resources, and of course, even geographical things, right? So, in doing this research, we kind of did a baseline where even though we looked at people in different geographical locations, we looked at people that represented all four of the DISC personality types. And DISC, really quickly: dominant, influencer, steady, and conscientious. Those are the main four. None of us are 100% anything, right? But almost all of us
Absolutely.
have something that's more dominant or that's more prominent in who we are. So we honed in on that piece that's more prominent. And what we found was that every single one of those four personality types, they are represented in the top 1,000 agents. So the person that we would feel is the wallflower, the person that doesn't really know how to work a room, but yet they're very good one-on-one, they still are able to be in the top 1,000 producers, which means they're hitting 20, 30. Purposefully did not look at people with large teams because, again, then it's like, yeah, you didn't really do it. Your team did it.
Right.
We looked at people that were solopreneurs or maybe had an assistant that worked part time. So the myth is that you've got to have a certain personality type. You've got to be this chatty Cathy. You've got to be able to work rooms. And it's not true. Not to say that personality doesn't work, right? But all four of the personalities have their strengths.
Very interesting. I mean, so for those of you, do you have a test that you recommend? So anybody out there, and we'll post a link to this as well. If you don't know your disc profile, you should absolutely take that. There's another one that's free, Lee, that I'm really fond of. It's called 16 Personalities. It's a really, really great one. And so we'll post a link to that as well. So, you've done this research, right? And you've identified this stuff. Do people fall into particular buckets? In other words, how does somebody take that understanding and make it actionable? How do they write their own playbook? How do they know what they should be doing, right? That best leverages who they are and their own personality type.
Yeah, great. I love that. So, what I have tried to do, to your point, is give people that fall into certain buckets guidelines. Because again, I don't believe this has to be 100% the school of hard knocks where you only learn by trial and error. I don't want that for people. But at the same time, we do know there are some things that are not going to transfer. So let me explain DISC and how it relates to lead generation and really finding your personality. So DISC, again, we've got these four personality types, and I like to usually explain this, and I didn't make this illustration up. I've heard it a lot at different conferences. But if you think of four individuals at an elevator, and all four of them represent one of the personality types. So, for example, I'm a D. I'm a dominant personality type.
Yep, I am
so
too.
D, you are too. Okay,
Yeah.
so we're birds of a feather. No
Yes.
wonder.
Exactly.
So the dominant person, and you tell me, Randy, if you've ever done this, and if you're embarrassed by it, just look away. At the elevator, the dominant person will walk up, and they might be the last person to walk up. They'll notice that the elevator button is lit. And even though there's three other people standing there, we dominant people typically will push it and not just tap it one time. Of course not. We've got to just kind of
That's amazing.
any faster, right?
Yes.
But that's because we are the people that are like, we've got places to go, we got things to do. So we're go, go, go. And then you'll have the influencer, which is who I call Chatty Cathy. And I don't mean that offensively. I think they're endearing.
Yes,
but Chatty Cathy will look at the whole group, and people are looking down and looking up and texting, and they're still trying to start a conversation. How's the weather? How's your day going? And everybody's like,
yeah.
Okay. So you've got the influencer. Then you've got the conscientious person, who typically, and this is so funny when I talk to conscientious people about this, but they do say they do this all the time. They may get on the elevator and look at the last time the elevator was serviced. They may even look at the weight limit and start counting heads if they feel like it's
interesting. That makes sense.
Hilarious. And then the last one, even though I kind of got it out of order, but steady. The steady person is that quiet person that may get to the back of the elevator so everybody else can get on, although the D's might get front and center, take up all the room. Even D's might even push door closed, but you've got this steady person that will put their arm out because they see somebody running down the hall trying to make the elevator. So we have these four different dynamics. These are typically, again, we're not 100% only one thing. Many of us, we're two, right? But what we've seen is that with each one of these personality types, there are certain things that everyone can do or put in their bucket so that they excel. For example, stable Mabels, the steady person, I always like for them to understand that they deal with paralysis of analysis, as well as our C's, conscientious.
Yeah.
So because they're more likely to get stuck, like they hear about 4 CRMs and 12 of these, and they're just like, oh my God, it's too much, it's overwhelming. So with them, both of them, oftentimes they need accountability, more so than D's. So they need someone or something. It could be a system even that prompts them. And I have a lot of people that are conscientious or steady, and they tell me they set up alerts on their phone all day long because that's a form of accountability.
Yeah.
So again, there's little things that each personality can do. Influencers, for example, are Chatty Cathys. They break the rule. The rule typically says focus on quality, not on quantity. But that is really directed to dominant people. Dominant people are go, 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 go. They want numbers. They want results. But the interesting thing is, we don't always, as dominant people, we sometimes will miss the quality of the relationship. People might feel like, oh, well, you're being rude, you're being abrasive. And it's not. We're just trying to get things done.
Yeah.
So that rule, focus on quality and not quantity, was really directed towards dominant people. But for Chatty Cathy's influencers, the rule is the reverse. They get quality. They know how to talk and enjoy people and laugh it up. And what I see with many of them with their lead generation is they, instead of blocking off 2 hours to do calls and doing maybe 20 to 30 calls, they'll do 2 calls because they had an hour conversation with each person.
Right.
So the rule now for them is focus on quantity, focus on the numbers, because quality is innate to them. So it's things like that. So we've looked at little patterns that each one of our personalities really, for some of us, need to focus on more, and others, like the dominant, focus on less.
It's really interesting, Lee. I've actually never thought of it like that, right? I've never, from my worldview, I guess to your point, right, is I preach a lot of times quality over quantity, but that fits my personality profile, right? So what you're saying is that there are people, and this resonates with me, there are people on my team who are more likely to have an hour conversation than a 10-minute conversation, and it's meandering, but it's quality. They're getting to know the person, they're building rapport and building a relationship, and maybe let's say our sales team, we're like, hey, how do you cut that script in half, right? You can double your calls. How do you cut it into a third? So on and so forth. So that's really interesting. And I think, Lee, what this makes me think of is something that bothers me, right? Is that most people don't take any time to better understand who they are, right? Most people, unfortunately, aren't deeply thoughtful. So when we talk about disc profile, when we talk about 16 personalities, these things aren't psychobabble, right? These things will reveal things about yourself that will help you deeply understand who you are. And to your point, Lee, figure out which strategies are going to work for you, right? Because it's not cookie cutter. It's not one size fits all. In fact, we've gone so far, Lee, in this company, right, where everybody on, let's just say my team, right? Everybody on my team has their 16 personalities profile all laid out. We have a slide we call How to Work With Me, right, where you sort of bullet point. So for me, there are things on there like I'm impatient. I just am. I'm a D, right? Things on there like don't come to me with problems unless you've at least thought about a solution. It doesn't have to be the right solution, but you have to have thought about it, right? There's a whole bunch of things like that. And then we go into one more thing, which I'd be curious to get your take on, that we've spent a lot of time on in the company, which is we call it your superpower. What is your superpower? And here's the point, right? It's our belief. So you have a superpower and you have a kryptonite. And the kryptonite is usually sort of the other side of that coin. But our belief is that people should really double down on their strengths rather than spending a disproportionate amount of time shoring up their weaknesses. It's not to say that we shouldn't try to shore up our weaknesses, but you're going to be better served by putting that energy and effort into doubling down on your strengths. So what are your thoughts on that?
So preacher, choir. Okay, so I am right there with you. I think that is one of the biggest things. Now for me, only time I like to focus on that kryptonite or the weaknesses is when someone is building a team. Because yes, now you can complement your weaknesses in your areas that need help or that are challenges for you. But when it's you and you're a solopreneur, you absolutely have to play to your strengths, particularly when I hear people say, hey, I am taking a long time getting off of that sales roller coaster, that feast or famine where they can't get stable income. When you don't have stable income, that tells me you aren't playing to your strengths.
Yeah.
And what I believe a strength is, and this is key, because when I talk to people, their definition of strength is a little skewed. A lot of people will say, oh, well, my strength is what I do well. That's only partly correct. And this is where we miss it. Our strength is what we do well and enjoy. Because if we don't enjoy it, I'm not going to do it long term.
Yeah.
I won't put any I won't have the motivation. I will have blue Mondays. I won't want to get up and do it. So it's got to be both enjoyable and something you excel at. And if it's not, then I always want people to get it off their plate. It's 2020. We've got enough automation tools now, apps, things that can kind of fill in those gaps for you of the things that you can't really consider strength.
I agree with that. I talked about that in a recent episode, right, where technology is the great leveler, right? It is a very empowering thing. And I know it's intimidating to some people, but frankly, most of it is easier to use than it's ever been before. I have a question for you, though, right? So when you talk about, so we call our audience and our users at ListReports, we have 250,000 real estate agents across the country who use our product. So it's a lot. And we call them agentpreneurs, right? It's a word that I think embodies what an agent's life is like. And it's a point of empathy for us as entrepreneurs, right? To say that we understand what you're going through. We understand what it's like to have to do 10 different jobs at once, right? It's crazy, the ups and downs that come from it. But as you've looked at these personality profile types, Lee, are there certain types that are just frankly better served by being on a team, right? As opposed to sort of going it alone? Are there certain types where you say, you know what, this is great, right? You're very additive, but you're stronger if you're part of a team that complements some of these skill sets?
Yeah, good. I love that. That's a great point. And I did pick up on you saying entrepreneur or agentpreneur throughout. Yeah. So I love that. Here's what I always say to people, and I say this every time I talk to people. I tell people you either have to have a team or you have to have time. And that's every single personality type. Because all of us, to your point, we have both kryptonite and superpowers, all of us. So every last one of us, if we don't have enough time to really function in our superpower, then we absolutely have to have a team. It's more obvious for the personality types that aren't administratively strong. So that would be steady and the influencer. Mm-hmm. But it's still there for us dominant people as well as for the conscientious. Because again, when I don't have a lot of time, I think I'm a nice person. And I try to be very kind to
You're
people,
a very nice person, I can tell.
But when my time is cut short and I'm frazzled, oh boy. So the parts of me that can be a little cutting come out a little bit more. And so all of us are like this. So I do believe, honestly, I try to train people from day one to be in the mindset of growing a team. Because unless you're doing this truly as more of a hobby, and there are people like that, and that's okay. Yeah. So if this is just a weekend, I just want extra money, shopping money, spending money, got it. But the moment you tell me you've got these goals and you have income goals, you're going to have every last one of our personalities. We need to surround ourselves, because you said it earlier, and I agree with you. If we're going to play to our strengths, that means we will have deficits.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I don't know how many people watch NBA and basketball, but that's what I think of is how as great as a Michael Jordan, since he just had The Last Dance documentary, but as great as one player is, they still absolutely need the team. And that's how I see it.
I think that makes sense.
You got to have a team. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I think that makes sense. I would say this to all of you listening right now who are team leaders, right? And there's a lot of people who watch the show who manage teams. You have an obligation, more so than a lot of you, I think, believe, to deeply understand the personalities and the profiles of those on your team. And I'll give you an example here. A couple years ago, I was looking at my team, and my team is filled disproportionately with introverts. It's just the way that it worked out. And that's not who I am. I'm a very extroverted person. And it hit me kind of like a ton of bricks, Lee. And I was like, oh my God, how am I expected to lead a team of people that I don't fundamentally understand? And so I took it upon myself to read as much stuff as I could. For those of you out there who are managing introverts and you're not like that, there's an amazing book called Quiet by Susan Cain. We will link to that as well. It is a wonderful book. And what it does is I think it helps you understand much more deeply how introverts work. This idea of the extrovert ideal that's been created over the last 100 years where, if you ask people in a survey, Lee, to describe an extrovert, they're like, handsome, gregarious, amazing, and you ask them to describe introverts and they're like, I don't know, it's like hunched, bad posture, right? It's terrible. And it's this extrovert ideal, and that companies and people favor extroverts, but you have to understand that introverts are deeply thoughtful, and they may not in the moment be able to give you the best answer, but they will come back to you with a better answer than you probably would have gotten otherwise. So my point is, take the time to deeply understand those around you. Have them take 16 personalities. Have them take DISC. Listen to what Dr. Lee is saying here, because these things are spot on, and you're going to have a better team if you understand them. So I'll get off my high horse, but something that I'm very passionate about, and I think most people don't take the time to do. I didn't, frankly, take the time to do that for a big part of my career.
Yeah, I really do think we underestimate the importance of how our personalities and our temperaments intertwine with each other. You do kind of just feel like, or maybe just the way we've been taught in prior generations, is that whatever, it doesn't matter who you are, this is what you're here to do. Mm-hmm. And that's true, but who we are still is going to kind of be almost like a covering, or it's going to taint everything we touch. So it's just as important. It really is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Lee, as we sort of wrap up here today, I really, really like to give our audience something very actionable. What can they do today, right now? What's a first step in this direction? Reading your book is obviously a good thing to do, but what can they be doing right now to take action here?
Absolutely. So to your point earlier, I would highly recommend people take one of the personality profiles, right? You've got Myers-Briggs. There's so many. You got Strength Finders. You've got DISC. I went with DISC just for my doctorate because of its validity, and more of the scientific underpinnings of it, since it's been around for over 100 years. But it is not the only thing out there. And so many of these tests resonate and help clarify for us not just who we are, but how we relate to both our work team and our clients. So to your point, I would highly recommend people take some form of test. And then secondarily, you've got to be able to interpret that data. So a lot of these tests out here, we can take them and they tell you, oh, you're an influencer. What does that translate into? Mm-hmm. This is where I would highly recommend, now it's time to use your superpower of Googling. We all have that superpower.
Yes, we do.
And to really identify what literature is out there about my temperament, about my personality type, because there's a lot out there, and most of it is good. Of course, I would go with verifiable sources. You know.
Of course.
But but I would highly recommend at least those two things to begin.
That makes perfect sense, Lee. I appreciate that. Dr. Lee, that was incredible advice, I think. I'm really excited about this conversation because it touches on something, maybe selfishly, that's just near and dear to my heart, right? Which is this idea of authenticity and, frankly, just getting people to take the time to deeply understand who they are, to deeply understand who their team is. So I appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts and your ideas and all of your research with our audience today.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun, and I could talk forever on it, so I hope I haven't bored anybody.
No, you haven't bored anybody. I promise you that, and I hope that we'll have a chance to have you back on in the future, maybe to continue the conversation. Thanks so much, Dr. Lee. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, guys.
Well, there you have it. Really great episode. Got up here on the screen again. Again, we'll link to this, learnwithlee.realtor. You can learn all about Dr. Lee and the research that she's done, the books that she's written. I think it's really great advice. Again, the one thing that I really want to leave you with is be thoughtful. Take the time to be thoughtful. Be thoughtful about who you are. Take some of these tests. They're rooted in really amazing research, and I will tell you that they absolutely work. And if you run a team, I cannot tell you how important it is to take the time to make sure you understand how the people on your team work, what makes them tick, because ultimately you're trying to construct a team that's going to be the strongest possible. And that frankly means bringing people into your team that have different types of personalities, different profiles. And again, Dr. Lee's point about there's no cookie cutter, right? There's no one playbook out there. So the more you understand who you are and what's going to work for you, the more you can be confident in doubling down on those things. So I hope you enjoyed today's show. All of the links are in the description below. Make sure you subscribe to her channel and our channel. Click the little bell to be notified. And until tomorrow, be safe, be healthy, be happy, and we'll see you soon.